The shimmering seafoam green envelope with its silver trim appeared in my mailbox on the morning of my 46th birthday. I knew it wasn't a birthday card. I didn't need to open it to guess what was inside. My family rarely remembered me, unless they needed something. I held the envelope, turning it over, my fingers brushing the raised lettering. You are cordially invited to the 45th wedding anniversary celebration of William and Carolyn Stewart. I let out a soft laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was painfully predictable. Just like last year and the year before that and nearly every year before, they always chose my birthday to send their invitation. Inside the quiet house in Portland, the only sound was Toby the cat purring on the windowsill. Late winter sunlight filtered through the trees outside and fell in dappled patches across my desk. I sat there, in the small kitchen that still smelled of stale coffee, holding the card, feeling hollow. My name is Mia Stewart, the second daughter of a family where appearances always mattered more than feelings, and today I was once again the only one celebrating my own 46th birthday. Just then, the door swung open. "Oh my God, Mom," Jenna, my daughter, nearly shouted as she burst inside, coat still on. I forgot what day it is. Mom, I'm so sorry." Her bag dropped to the floor and she threw her arms around me. The scent of her shampoo still lingered in her hair, warm and apologetic. I sat still, letting her hug me for as long as she needed. I got caught up in finals, and then it just hit me. "Are you mad?" I shook my head, smiling faintly though my heart clenched. "It's okay, you're here now." Even though we both knew, "it's okay" was just my way of masking the hurt. Jenna glanced down at my hands. "What's that? Did someone send you something?" I held up the envelope, forcing a half smile. "Grandma and Grandpa, it's their 45th anniversary invitation. Arrived today, of course." Jenna's face darkened. She snatched the envelope and read through it. The message, "Want you to give a speech again." Her voice dropped, teeth gritting. "They've forgotten your birthday nearly 2 decades in a row and still have the nerve to ask you to talk about their love?" I tried to chuckle, voice catching in my throat. "Only the 26th time, but who's counting, right?" Right then, my phone rang. The screen flashed. "Mom calling." I looked at Jenna, then let it ring. "Probably about the party," Jenna muttered. "Or maybe she wants another one of your emotional speeches like every year." I just nodded. The call ended, then rang again 3 seconds later. This time it was my sister. "Lindsay, calling from Chicago." I didn't answer. Jenna sat down beside me, her tone sharper than usual. "Mom, why do you let them treat you like you're invisible?" I said nothing. I'd never seen Jenna's eyes blaze like that, like she was ready to defend me from the whole world. The card still lay on the table, a quiet reminder of all the forgotten years. Jenna picked it up again, pressing her finger along the edge as if she could tear it apart. "Last year you stood in front of 100 people talking about Grandma and Grandpa's enduring love, while I know for a fact you ate your birthday dinner alone with a sandwich and a candle from the junk drawer." I couldn't argue. I couldn't, 'cause Jenna was right. I remembered every year. Since I turned 20, when my parents hosted their 15th anniversary in Charleston with fireworks, a standing buffet, and a full choir from the local conservatory. I stood there in an ivory dress they picked, not because I liked it, but because it matches the theme. No one remembered it was my birthday. When I reminded them, Mom laughed, "Oh, what a coincidence, but today's really about us, sweetheart." Every year after that, I was assigned to write and deliver the speech, sometimes even select the music. And every year, my birthday landed exactly on the day the invitation was sent. "You know what gift I get every year?" I asked Jenna, half joking. She looked up at me, still frowning. "What?" "The invitation," I smiled bitterly, "arrives right on time, like clockwork." When I was 33, I had the flu and was bedridden. My parents still held their 32nd anniversary dinner at a fancy French restaurant in Seattle. I wrote the speech from bed and emailed it to Lindsay to print. She made sure to say, "Everyone's really looking forward to your part." "No one asked if you were okay, did they?" Jenna said quietly. I nodded. Dad sent one text. Send the speech soon. Your mom's organizing the order of events. Jenna exhaled hard. That's awful. I got up and walked to the old wooden cabinet in the living room, opening the bottom drawer. Inside was a stack of photo albums, mostly from family anniversaries. I pulled out the one from 2014, flipping through the pages. They took tons of pictures. Mom in a silver satin dress, smiling beside Dad with a wine glass. Lindsay, as always, in a Ralph Lauren gown. Even cousin Jeremy and his girlfriend had solo shots against the event backdrop. And me? I was there too. But in most photos, I stood at the edge of the frame, holding a crooked backdrop or crouching to clean something on the floor. One shot clearly showed me carrying a tray of food, helping a server. You're like the backstage crew, Jenna said softly, but the only one keeping the whole performance running. I didn't know what to say. When had I gotten used to this? When did being overlooked become an unnamed habit? Jenna turned to a photo from 2017 where I was smiling, but not looking at the camera. You look really pretty here, Mom. I smiled faintly. I thought the photographer was calling me. Turns out, he was calling Lindsay. The phone rang again. This time it was Ethan, my younger brother. I saw his name on the screen and let it ring out like the others. Jenna looked at me, eyes glistening. Mom, you don't have to keep putting up with this. There's no reason anyone should feel invisible in their own family. I looked at my daughter, 18 years old, yet her gaze held more clarity than many adults I'd known. What do you think I should do? She pressed her lips together. I think it's time you wrote a different kind of speech. Not for their anniversary, but for yourself. I went still. And then, like a switch flipping on in the dark, the thought hit me. Yes, a speech, but for the first time, one for myself. I turned back to my desk and opened my laptop. The cursor blinked on a blank screen. Jenna stood behind me, placing her hand gently on my shoulder. You know, Mom, this year, if you write something real, not just I, but the whole world might actually listen? I started typing the first few lines, and my heart, after years of silent endurance, finally began to speak. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on the couch, the glow from the desk lamp casting shadows on the ceiling, the silhouette of Toby curled up and asleep. My laptop was still open on the table, the cursor blinking like a quiet invitation. Jenna stepped out of her room, hair tousled, holding a cup of hot cocoa. You're still up? She asked, setting the mug down. Still thinking about the speech? I nodded, glancing at the screen. Not exactly a speech, I'm writing something else. Something else? I took a deep breath and turned to my daughter. Do you remember I told you about a memoir draft I wrote a few years ago? The one I tucked away in a drawer because I didn't think anyone would care? Jenna sat down beside me, her eyes lighting up. The one titled No One Sees Me, right? I smiled faintly. Close, but I've changed the title now. I turned the laptop toward Jenna. The bold title appeared on the screen. The Art of Being Forgotten, A Daughter's Story from the Shadows. Jenna was quiet for a long moment. And you're really going to publish it? I nodded. For the first time, I don't want to hide. I don't want to keep writing polished speeches for a family love story I've never truly been part of. The phone rang, interrupting us. It was Ethan. For the third time that day. I silenced it. Probably about the anniversary planning meeting, Jenna said, glancing at the screen. He posted on Facebook that you haven't replied to the organizing committee. He even tagged you. I let out a soft laugh. Good. Maybe they're starting to feel a little unsettled. Jenna leaned back in her chair. So, you're not going to the party? I looked at her, hesitated for a few seconds. No, I'm not going. Not this time. Not when my words are only used as decoration. So what are you going to do instead? I turned back to the screen, the cursor now blinking at the start of the page. I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to show them what it feels like to always be behind the camera, to always be the afterthought, never the priority. The doorbell rang, breaking the silence. Jenna stood up. Who'd come by at this hour? I opened the door, and there stood Lindsay, my sister, in a tailored trench coat, deep wine lipstick, and an expression she couldn't quite mask. "Mia, we need to talk," she said, walking into the house without waiting for an invitation. Jenna stepped back slightly. I shut the door calmly. Lindsay sat at the table, glanced at my laptop, then looked at me. "You're writing something, aren't you? Ethan said you've gone silent and Mom's in a panic. What exactly are you planning to do for the anniversary?" I pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "Well, I'm not going. And I'm not writing their flowery speeches anymore. I'm writing the real story." Lindsay clutched the strap of her purse tighter. "You're really going to expose the whole family? In the press? Online? Do you even realize what this will cause?" I nodded. "You don't have to worry. I'm not writing to get revenge. I'm writing to survive. You'll destroy our family's image." I paused for a moment, then said, "Do you know what image destroyed me? That photo from 2002, where the whole family posed in front of the church for the 25th anniversary. And I was cut halfway out of the frame because I was in the back, holding the flower basket." Lindsay said nothing. She stared at me for a long while, then asked, "You're really going to publish it?" I nodded again. "The manuscript's already submitted. The editor called this afternoon. They want to release it during the anniversary week." Her eyes darkened. "Mom will never forgive you." I gave a soft smile, quiet but resolute. I figured, but she's never really forgiven me anyway, for not being Lindsay. Jenna walked in, holding 2 cups of tea. "Instead of fighting, how about we all have something warm to drink?" I took the cup, turned to my sister. "This time, I'm not backing down. I've lived in silence long enough." The next morning, the real storm began. I was editing chapter 3 of the manuscript when my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Every time I silenced it, another call came from someone new. First, Ethan. 4 calls in a row. Then Mom. Then a text from an unfamiliar number, but I knew the writing style right away. "Definitely Lindsay's husband, the lawyer. Our family is deeply concerned about your mental state," the dry message read. "We hope you'll reconsider this impulsive action." I closed my eyes for a few seconds, breathed deeply. The manuscript still unfinished, I resumed typing. Being ignored doesn't hurt as much as being called too sensitive. They don't realize the wounds weren't made by knives, but by silence, cutting deeper year after year. That afternoon, Mom showed up at my house unannounced. Jenna was cooking in the kitchen. The moment the door opened, the smell of tomato sauce and basil filled the air. "Mia," my mother said, her voice clipped and deliberate. "What exactly are you doing?" I stood up and calmly offered her a seat, but she stayed standing, clutching her purse strap like she was ready to pull out a list of evidence. "I'm writing a book about the family," I answered. "My truth. What I've been through." "You call that the truth?" she nearly hissed. "You want people to read that and see us as monsters?" I kept my voice calm. "I'm not calling anyone a monster, but I can't keep pretending everything was perfect." "This is going to ruin everything," my mother shouted. "Your father's and my reputation, our social ties, the anniversary party. Do you know how many people are counting on this?" I stayed quiet for a moment, then said, slowly, "I used to count on things too. For 46 years. A birthday wish, an unsolicited hug, a photo where I wasn't shoved to the edge. But I've stopped waiting, Mom." She looked at me as if I'd betrayed something sacred. "So this isn't revenge?" "No," I said, meeting her eyes. "This is about being seen, about being heard." Jenna walked into the room just then, carrying a glass of lemonade and a gaze that left no doubt she was there to shield me. "Grandma, Mom's not writing to hurt anyone. She's writing because no one's really listened to her in a long time." My mother turned away, eyes faltering, but before she left the house, she dropped one final line, cold and sharp. "If you publish that book, don't expect to be part of this family anymore." That evening, I received an email from an unfamiliar address, a journalist from the Seattle Observer. "We heard about your upcoming manuscript through a source in the publishing world. If you're open to it, we'd love to do a feature on silence in American families." I didn't respond right away. The next morning, It was Ethan who showed up. My brother rarely visited, and never this early. "Mia," Ethan said, sitting across from me in the living room, "you can write whatever you want. You're a writer. But this time, you're attacking the family." I didn't reply. I simply handed him a printed excerpt from chapter 4. He read it, then looked at me, disbelief on his face. "You remember that, the time Mom and Dad forgot to pick you up at the bus stop after summer camp in 1994? I smiled, but there was no joy behind it. I waited in the parking lot for 3 hours. No one came. Ethan folded the page and looked down. "You're really not going to stop?" "No," I said. "I've been silent long enough. I'm not writing to destroy something good. I'm writing to show them that their good always came at a cost I paid alone." The living room window trembled slightly from the wind. Outside, the seasons were shifting. Inside me, too. A new season was arriving. And this time, I wouldn't be hiding in the shade. The pre-anniversary dinner was held at an upscale Italian restaurant in downtown Tacoma. The one my mother always said had lighting that makes everyone look a shade more flawless. My parents sat at the head of the long table. Lindsay was on Mom's left, Ethan on Dad's right. Jenna and I arrived 10 minutes late, just enough to make the entire table pause when we walked in. I could feel their eyes on me, heavy and expectant, like I held the key to a bomb they were hoping to keep sealed. Mom gave a forced smile, but the way she placed her fork, precise and final, said more than words ever could. "Mia, let's have dinner as a family, okay?" "Then let's start as a family should by telling the truth," I said, settling into my seat beside Jenna. The table went silent. Only the faint clinking of cutlery could be heard from another table nearby. I pulled a sealed brown envelope from my bag and placed it on the table. "I emailed everyone a copy of the memoir draft," I said. "But in case someone hasn't read it, this is the print version." My mother raised an eyebrow. "I actually read it. Every word. And it broke my heart." "Being heartbroken doesn't mean it's not true," I replied, my tone steady. Ethan sighed, lifting his wine glass like he was trying to hide behind it. Lindsay leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "And," Lindsay said, "what do you want? A group apology before the lasagna?" I shook my head. "I don't want an apology. I want to be seen, to be heard." My father spoke for the first time. "Mia, can you tell us what made you feel this way without bringing the whole world into it?" Jenna placed her hand on mine, gentle but firm. "Because the world needs to know that family isn't always a safe place." The words stunned everyone. "I'm not writing for revenge," I continued. "I'm writing to exist, to make sure I don't disappear again." My mother placed her wineglass down, her hand slightly trembling. "You're hurting us, Mia." I looked up at her, voice calm. "I'm just telling the part of the story the families always pretended wasn't there." At that moment, Jenna abruptly stood up. "I'm sorry, but I can't sit here while you make my mom the villain for daring to speak." "Jenna," Lindsay started. "No, Aunt Lindsay," Jenna interrupted. "This family has always wanted my mom to write nice, warm words, speeches that make everyone feel good, but no one ever asked if she felt good writing them." She turned to me, voice shaking with emotion. "I grew up beside a woman who was kind to everyone even when she was hurting, and now that she's standing up for herself, you call it selfish?" Ethan put his wineglass down, his gaze shifting to Jenna. "No one said Mia was selfish." "But you're all acting like she is," Jenna shot back. "Doesn't anyone in this family realize this is wrong?" No one answered. The air in the room thickened like melting cheese on cooling pasta. I looked at my mother, who had bowed her head, her fingers twisting her wedding ring. "You know what?" I said quietly. "As a kid, I thought I wanted to be like you. Elegant, composed, always in control. But then I realized you were never really strong." My mother lifted her eyes, meeting mine in quiet shock. "Because being strong isn't about staying silent. It's not about making everything look perfect while your children learn to love themselves from the shadows." She didn't respond. I took out my phone, opened the email app, and hit send on the final manuscript to the publisher. A small action, but it carried the weight of an alarm bell ringing. "You don't have to agree with what I wrote," I said softly, "but you need to know. This is me, whole, unedited, nothing held back." Everyone remained silent. Jenna pulled out her phone and sent a quick message. "Mom," she said, looking at me with a smile, "the manuscript just went live on the front page of Voices Unheard. They want to interview you next week." I looked at her, my eyes welling up. "How did you just help people hear what they've been missing for far too long?" And in that moment, at a dinner table still suspended between pride and confusion, I knew I wasn't alone anymore. Just 3 days after the pre-anniversary dinner, my memoir was officially released. The title, The Art of Being Forgotten, quickly climbed to the most searched book list on online platforms. Less than a week later, I received an email from the publisher. They were already going into a second print due to high demand. And then, the unthinkable happened. A producer from Morning Voices, a nationally broadcast program, invited me for a live interview, not just to talk about the book, but to talk about silence in families that appear perfect. I looked at Jenna as I read the email, my hands still trembling. "Are you sure I should do this?" Jenna looked up from her notebook, where she was outlining a media strategy. "You shouldn't, Mom. You have to." I laughed. "You really are my daughter." The taping took place in a Seattle studio. I sat under bright lights, across from a woman in her 50s, her eyes sharp but kind. "Ladies and gentlemen," she looked directly into the camera, "today we're speaking with Mia Stewart, the author of a memoir that's stirring conversations nationwide. A brave whisper from a daughter long forgotten by her family." I took a deep breath and smiled. "Actually," I said, "this isn't a whisper. This is the first time I've spoken loudly enough for even myself to hear." This show garnered over 3 million views in just 48 hours. But what surprised me most wasn't the public response. It was the reaction from people I never thought would change. The next morning, I received a message from Dad. "Just watched the show, not sure if you'd want to talk, but if you'll let me, I'd like to bring coffee and just listen." It took me a while to reply. 10 o'clock. "Don't bring the latte you think I like. I drink it black, no sugar. Since 2012. Dad arrived right on time. He wore an old olive sweater, his face more lined than I remembered. We sat in the living room. Toby jumped into the window seat as if he sensed the gravity of the moment. Dad held his coffee, not drinking yet. "Mia," he said slowly, "I don't have an excuse. But I do have a truth. I always saw you. I just didn't have the courage to break the silence in this house." I looked at him, unsure whether to feel sadness or relief. "Why?" I asked. "Because Mom was too strong?" He nodded, eyes misting. "Because I was too weak." For the first time in my life, I saw my father truly cry. Not out of grief, but out of awakening. 2 days later, I received a parcel from Lindsay. No note, just a small box filled with old photos of me. From childhood through adulthood. Laminated, each with a handwritten note on the back. I read the back of one photo taken when I was 16, standing in the snow outside school. "Mom didn't choose this one to print, but you were as beautiful as the first snow. Signed, Lindsay." A text from her came in just after. "If you do a book tour in Chicago, stay with me. And if you'll let me, I'd like to sit front row this time." That evening, Jenna was out at study group, and I sat in my office, polishing the final lines of the ebook. A new email popped up. From Ethan Stewart. Subject: "Are you free for dinner?" Short and to the point. "I want to ask, how did you find the courage to write all that? Because now, I think I need to face parts of myself I've been ignoring for 20 years. A few days later, when Mom knocked on my door, I wasn't surprised. She wore no makeup, and in her arms was an old leather notebook. "I'm not here to ask you to come back," she said, not looking around, not judging. "I just want to give you this." I opened it. Inside were carefully written lines in rounded handwriting. Notes from what I forgot. Your birthday. the 2001 Writing Award, your first published article. All the things I should have remembered. I looked up. Her eyes were brimming with tears. I didn't know how to love you right, but I'm learning. If you're still willing to let me try. I nodded gently. Start by having coffee with me. We don't even have to talk, just sit. Like two people learning how to be mother and daughter again. And inside me, something lifted. Not every wound heals within the pages of a book, but sometimes the act of writing it down is the first dose of medicine. One early morning in April, I received a message from my mother. Not a reminder or a reprimand like in years past, but a photo. A snapshot of a desk calendar, open to April. Each square was carefully handwritten in blue ink. On the 12th, one line stood out. Mia's birthday, eldest daughter, 47 years old, bestseller author. Below that, a smaller note read, 2001 National Short Story Award. I sat still for a few seconds, my hand frozen around the still steaming teacup. Not because my mother had written those things, but because, for the first time in my life, she remembered them, as if they'd never been forgotten. The message that came with the photo read, I'm starting over. This calendar will stay with me for the rest of my life. And I'm writing it with the love you should have received long ago. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I opened the cabinet and pulled out the old tin box where I kept greeting cards. None of them were from her. But this time, I knew I didn't need more proof of the past. The present had begun to shift. One Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang. Jenna ran from the kitchen, her hands still dusted with cookie dough. Mom, Grandma just texted, said we better not be late for tea. I laughed. She's the most punctual one in the family now, huh? And the one buying scones in bulk every week. We laughed together, then grabbed our bags and headed out to the car. Since the memoir was released, something unexpected had happened. My family, who used to only gather for formal holidays, started meeting weekly. It began with Jenna's suggestion as a way to cool off after the explosive anniversary dinner, but to everyone's surprise, my mother embraced it immediately. She even gave it a name, Wednesday Tea, held promptly at 3 o'clock, with a strict rule. No one could arrive more than 10 minutes late. We no longer discussed society gossip or upcoming events. We shared what books we were reading, stories about neighbors adopting kittens, or how Lindsay had started painting again at 50. Ethan, who used to never sit still for more than 30 minutes, now brought chamomile tea every week. He carried a notebook with him, where he wrote things he admired about each person in the family, a sort of personal emotional archive, as he called it. And my mother, once obsessed with everything from napkin colors to the tilt of a picture frame, now sat quietly and listened to each of us. Sometimes she'd simply rest her hand on mine, or look at Jenna with a gentleness I had never seen during my childhood. On the 6th week of Wednesday Tea, just after a fresh rain had swept through Seattle, my mother arrived with a package wrapped in linen fabric. For you, she said, but only so you can keep it for me. I opened it. Inside was a thick, soft, leather-bound notebook, hand-titled, Notes on Things That Can't Be Fixed But Can Be Understood. I turned the first page. It was a passage about the day I was born, written from my mother's memory, each line brief but full of emotion. You didn't cry loudly, but you looked right into my eyes, as if asking, "Do you see me, Mom?" I couldn't hold back my tears. My mother whispered, "I see you now, more clearly than ever." I rested my hand on the page, saying nothing. 3 months later, I accepted an invitation to speak at a conference in Boston on the theme, Breaking the Silence in Family Relationships. The surprise? I didn't go alone. Jenna came with me, and so did my mother. "Not to supervise you," she said while booking the flights, "but to hear you speak. To everyone, no interruptions, no talking over you." The trip was short, but it taught me something. Healing doesn't come from grand gestures. It comes from small, repeated steps that grow into habit. A glance. A nod. a weekly tea. A book that was once seen as betrayal, now a bridge to what was never spoken. That evening, when I returned home, Jenna was on the floor editing her first podcast episode. She looked up at me, her eyes glowing. "You know, Mom," she said, "your story saved so many people, but the one I'm most proud of is that you saved yourself." I sat beside her, our shoulders touching. At last, I was no longer invisible in my own story. I had been seen. And this time, others were watching too. On the final Sunday morning of June, I sat by the window in my little office, hands wrapped around a warm cup of jasmine tea. The early sunlight filtered through sheer white curtains, resting gently on the draft of my new manuscript, not a memoir this time, but a novel inspired by women who dared to step out of the shadows. Toby lay half asleep under the desk, occasionally twitching. In this small house in Tacoma, no space was forgotten anymore. Just like me. I had spent most of my life thinking that if I spoke less, sacrificed more, stepped further back, then love would eventually find its way to me. But love cannot grow in the soil of neglect. It needs light, and I had learned how to flip the switch myself. The memoir wasn't just a response to the past, it was a declaration for the future. I am here. I exist. And I deserve to be heard, seen, and loved. Unconditionally. Last week, at the press event for the book's international release, a reporter asked me, "What would you say is your greatest success? Making the New York Times list, the TV interviews, the apologies from those who hurt you?" I just smiled and answered, "No. My greatest success is when my daughter said she's proud I saved myself. When I can sit here in my own home and write the first lines of a new chapter, not needing anyone's validation anymore, but still receiving it. My mother is no longer the woman who controlled every detail of the party. She's the first to arrive each Wednesday afternoon, always bringing something new. A strange floral tea, a newspaper clipping, or just a funny story about a neighbor with a mini pig." Lindsay left her law firm job to open an art class for middle-aged women. In a recent handwritten letter, she wrote, "You taught me to face the parts of myself I'd always avoided. Not everyone is brave enough to do that in front of the whole world." Ethan started a blog about fatherhood, something he once called minor stuff, but now he says, if a mother can teach the world about silence, then a father should learn how to speak up. Jenna is in her senior year of college. She's leading a research project on the link between literature and emotional healing within families. In her latest essay, she wrote, "I watched my mother step out of the shadow others drew for her, and I learned that sometimes the best way to change a family is to start with one story." And I, Mia Stewart, 47, author, single mom, once the one on the sidelines, am now living a full life on my own terms. I don't need grand parties to hear my name called. I have Jenna, I have pages to write, I have Wednesday tea. I had the look of recognition from the mother who once forgot her daughter's birthday for nearly 30 years. I came out of silence not with anger, but with clarity. I was once the girl no one photographed, the last name called at family gatherings, the one whose birthday gift was often an unfortunate coincidence. Now I'm the one invited to speak about courage, a face on translated book covers in 8 languages, the person her daughter clings to when she needs a strong shoulder. That night, after tea, my mother stayed behind. She stood by the bookshelf, fingers gliding over the foreign editions of the memoir. After a while, she turned to me, her eyes more sincere than any apology I'd ever dreamed of. "I'll never forget again," she said. "Not your birthday. Not the day you stepped into the light." I nodded gently. "You don't have to remember everything, you know?" "Why not?" "Because now I remember it for myself." She laughed. No defenses, no bitterness. Just a mother learning how to love her daughter again. Late, but not too late. I returned to my desk and opened my laptop. The screen glowed with the title. Chapter 1. A Different Life. And I knew, this time, I wasn't writing to be seen. I was writing because I had already been seen. And that, more than any book, title, or round of applause, was the greatest victory of my life. Mia's story reminds us that sometimes the journey to being heard begins by daring to speak, even if it's late, even if it's painful. In real life, many are like Mia, quietly enduring, sacrificing, slowly fading into the background of their own families. But healing can always begin not with blame, but with truth and courage. Being seen isn't a privilege, it's a birthright, and it's never too late to be seen for who you truly are. What do you think about Mia's journey? Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Share your thoughts below and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about family, hurt, and healing.